Today's episode is with Laura Sinclair, who is a pastor's wife who is always ready to pick up and move. She has a passion for helping others navigate the challenges that come with relocation. She built a 5-star real estate career in a new town, specifically helping others relocate to the area. But she really wanted to help people everywhere get the hand-holding help that they need when it came to relocation. So now that's where she is. She's helping families be able to relocate and have the support that they need. And I can't really relate to this because I don't know if this is going to surprise you or not, but I literally have moved to nowhere. I moved to college 15 minutes away from my house. And then I moved 30 minutes north. And then I've literally lived there my whole life. So there's part of me that's jealous about the fact that you're moving and changing. But I also do realize that comes with a lot of challenges, a lot of adjustments, and hard times, but it does feel a little bit like an adventure. So I'm excited to talk more about that. I'm excited to talk about your role as a pastor's wife and all that comes with being a mom and all that you do. But first, Laura, thank you so much for coming here and having this conversation with me today.
Thanks, Chelsea. I'm really excited to talk with you.
What else should the listeners know about you?
Well, I am a Canadian citizen. I lived there, actually. I could relate to you having never moved anywhere for a long time. I lived there my whole childhood in the same home, in the same town, until I decided to get up and move to Virginia to go to university. So that's what brought me to the U.S. I thought it would be temporary, and then I'd go back to my little town and stay there forever. But instead, I met my husband, and he ended up having a calling here in South Carolina, and that's how we ended up in the town we are now.
Oh, that's crazy. I can't imagine the big change from actually not just moving from a different state or a different city, but also a different country. How was that for you?
Yeah. That was more challenging than I thought it would be. And I blame media for thinking it would be so easy. It's oh, you want to move to the States, just marry an American.
Okay.
But it's not that simple. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's very expensive, and they're not very nice. USCIS, they make it challenging.
Real interesting. Well, so you decided to come to school here, and how hard is it for you to come to school in the United States?
It's actually easier for me than for Americans, because we actually get out of having to take the SATs and ACTs.
Oh, the ACTs, those dumb ACTs.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear a secret? I can't wait for all the listeners to know how just genius I am. When I had to take the ACT, I think I was out super late. I woke up, ate a terrible breakfast, and went there. And do you want to know how I answered my questions? I can't believe I'm admitting this to anyone.
Oh my gosh.
I literally drew patterns, okay? I drew patterns of the bubbles. I didn't even waste my time to read questions, or I was just this is for the birds.
This is obvious.
Yeah, in school really wasn't ever I was actually smart in school and I did really well in school, but something about the test, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go to college, and I ended up going for a little bit, but I did get a 21, which isn't terrible, but also I feel like it's amazing for drawing bubbles. So I recommended that to my daughters who recently took it, and they didn't take my advice, and actually I got a better score than them. So I'm just saying, if you don't like taking tests, maybe you should try the patterns and just make it fun. So that's terrible.
Yeah,
that's terrible advice. Well, it's if it works, it works. I mean, I don't know that it would work for everyone. And I know it's interesting now because actually parents pay for tutors. They take these classes. I know since COVID, some of the expectations of the ACT that has kind of changed and kind of mellowed out a little bit, but I don't really know. Anyway, so you come to the States, and you went to Virginia, which I recently visited Virginia, and it is so beautiful. Holy cow.
Oh, man, I loved living there.
I was not knowing what to expect when I went to go visit there. And I got there and I'm okay, should I just live here? Because it is so, so beautiful. So but I want to hear about this. So you go to college, you're in Virginia, you meet your husband, and then what?
Well, then we decide that we're going to get married, so I don't have to go back to Canada.
Yeah.
Not that going back to Canada was a problem, but that
you wanted to be together, right?
Yes. So so as I was doing my student teaching, which I actually did go back to Canada for 6 months before we got married to finish my student teaching semester. And that was the first time since taking my education classes that I realized I didn't love teaching. So here I was with an education degree. I love the theory. I love taking something abstract and like a big complex concept and stretching it out and then putting it back together in a way that children could understand. I loved all that. So my classes were so fun. But then when it came time to actually be in the classroom and helping students and dealing with behavior issues and dealing with parents and writing lesson plans, I was like, this is not for me. And I didn't have enough courage at that point to abandon teaching. I was just like, well, everybody's job's kind of hard. Everybody doesn't love what they do all the time. But because I was having to get my green card, which meant I wasn't allowed to work for that first year-ish of being in the States, it gave me a lot of time alone, which was very hard. That season of loneliness was really challenging. But it was the first time in my life that I ever stopped to listen to myself and not just follow the path that was laid out before me. And actually ask myself what I wanted, what I was passionate about, what I was skilled in, and what I wasn't skilled in, and what I would be burnt out by, which I came to the conclusion. It took a few months. It took a while of thinking on it and praying about it. But that teaching was not my calling. And if it wasn't for that season of loneliness, I wouldn't have come to that conclusion.
I actually want to talk about this loneliness idea that you just shared about this season of loneliness and typically, if you think about our lives, we are always connected to something or someone, especially now with our phones, right? There is always a distraction. There's usually people. We're always going and going, and we're learning and we're achieving something, and we have this goal in mind. And how often do we ever stop to sit in that loneliness, that quiet, that stillness? And so I love that. I'm sure it wasn't easy to go to this place of loneliness for you after. So you were a newlywed, you were a new permanent resident, I think is what you called it. So a permanent resident here in the US. And my situation was a little bit different the first time that I think I found myself like in this state of loneliness. I was actually, so I had been married for a few years. I was pregnant with my twins, and at 28 weeks, I think 28 weeks, I got put on bed rest. And I went from working like 6 jobs. I literally worked like 6 different places. I was like teaching dance. I was having so much fun. And all of a sudden, I literally found myself on a couch by myself all day long. My husband would go to work. He would go to school, and then he would come home and he'd be like, hey, do you mind if I like go play basketball? And I would go like, that's okay. That sounds nice. And then he would leave, and I would just sob on the couch like, wow, like life is going on for everyone around me and not me. And that was the first time I was forced into stillness. But honestly, I look back at that time and I'm like, wow, there was so much growth that happened for me internally. I learned how to be quiet with myself. I learned how to listen to myself in those quiet moments. I learned how strong and capable I was without outside support, without being connected to a job or an achievement or anything. I was literally just sitting in that moment. And so the thing about that I think is hard is because, that looks like a gift to me now. And maybe that was a gift for you. But how can we give ourselves that opportunity without being forced into it? Right. Like how can, and maybe that's it.
That's
like
a good question.
Now how we're like continue, because just because I had it once where I had 2 months of laying on a couch or a bed, now it's still important to take that time, and we use the word loneliness, but maybe it's stillness, maybe it's just alone time, it's quiet time, it's reflection time, it's asking those hard questions. Remind me some of those questions that you said you asked to yourself.
Yeah, I was really asking myself, I mean, it was in the form of a career, but that's never all it is, right? There's always humans are so complex. So I was asking myself what I wanted to do. Well, I didn't want to be a teacher. I had this degree I wasn't going to use. I spent all this money to get it. Like what was I going to do? I had no idea. I hadn't considered anything else for myself. So that was my main question. But the answers that were coming out of that question were helping me understand better. So it was like, okay, I don't want to do teaching because it involves pouring out the caregiver part of myself. And I want to save that for my family. I don't have endless amounts of care to give. If I'm giving it out to kids all day long, I'm going to come home and not have any left for my own family. So, I was learning about myself. Okay, I'm not as patient as some other people. I'm not as grace giving as some other people. I get energy from being alone in my thoughts and having time to build something mentally rather than having to perform, be in the classroom for 8 hours a day. So these were things I was learning about myself because they were coming out of the question of what do I want to spend my days doing every single day? And when I came to that awareness that it wasn't teaching, it took months to figure out what it might be. And then even then, when I had a hunch, I just tried. I didn't know. So we're always growing and evolving, but that changed the trajectory. I really believe that if I hadn't had that season of loneliness and of me time and alone time, I don't mean that in a cliche way of like, I got time to go get a pedicure, like actual soul reflecting time because I was forced to, like you said. I really think to this day, I'd be a teacher in the classroom right now, and I'd probably be doing an okay job, and I'd probably have a lot less energy to give to my family. And I definitely wouldn't be living the life I think I'm called to live. So I'm thankful for that time, but it doesn't take away the fact that it was really hard when you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a previous guest share that she was also a teacher, and she was an engineer, and she had gone through school. She had gotten her degree, and she had worked for a few years in the field, and she was like, I don't want to do this. And she shared with us that she thought to herself, okay, yeah, that could be a waste of 4 years or 6 years of my time with my schooling. And she's like, but I also, so it's like giving up 6 years or giving up the rest of my life. And you have the rest of your life to live. And so I think that that's a really important message. Like if you feel like you're being called in a different direction, being able to say, yes, I've invested this time. And also you get to take all the things that you've learned, right? You get to take your education with you. You get to take those lessons and use them in the direction that you choose to go, right? You're not stuck. You're never stuck in a place.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so true what she said. It's not worth the trade-off of having a life of unhappiness just because you're like, oh, I'm supposed to do this. And there was a lot of shame I put off telling my family for quite a while, because I had this, in between time where everyone just thought I was waiting for my green card. Like, oh, she'll get her green card and she'll start teaching. In my head, I'm like, that's not happening. How am I going to tell them that's not happening? And there was so much shame about like, I guess pivoting, but that's so silly. I think when we grew up, it was more common to have one career and to excel in it and do this and then do this and then do this. And whereas now that's definitely not the path that most people take, but we're still shedding some of those chains that comes with that lifestyle of growing up in this is the way you go. You do this and then you do this. So that's definitely something I struggled with.
And when you mentioned shame around that decision that you wanted to change what you thought you wanted to do, what did you believe about yourself in those moments?
Think I believed that my worth and my identity came in following the path and doing what I was told. And I've been seeing some funny things on Instagram lately about like the eldest daughter syndrome. I don't know if you've seen that, but like they're like, hey, millennial eldest daughters, what service provider job are you in right now? And it's just like you kind of grow up with that expectation of like, okay, like you're the oldest sister. You're always looking out for everybody. And if you don't make this happen, then nobody else will. And I think we all, if you're an eldest daughter, you can relate to that feeling of it's my job to make sure everyone else is cared for. And I think that's why teaching was always what I thought I wanted to do, because I wasn't actually thinking about me and about my calling and my passions. I was thinking about children and students and how I can serve the world, which there's definitely good there, but you can't serve the world if you're not doing something that gives you energy because you'll just burn out. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's a joke in my family that I have the eldest child syndrome. I'm actually a middle child of 6, but for some reason, it's like me and my sister, she's the oldest, and we joke all the time that I like took her role and she took mine. And so I actually can relate to that a lot of the responsibility of like, and that's actually something that happened to me when I got put on bed rest. Although I mentioned that I had 5 jobs at the time, and it was really humbling to sit back and watch everything go on without me. And I was like, wait, it can go on without me. And I know that sounds like arrogant, but you're like, wait, the club still goes, like the dance studio still goes, like all the things are still running there. I'm replaceable. Like, and that's actually what it comes down to is there will always be someone who can do your job, right? So you better be doing something that feels really, really good, or you better be implementing your purpose, your passions into the work that you're doing, because it doesn't matter. There's always options for people. You are replaceable, and that's not said to be mean or rude, but it's like giving you permission to do what feels right and good for you.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, it's so important actually. And it's actually a really good time if you have something you've been wanting to change in your life, whether it's a career change or it's a habit or just, something in your lifestyle that you would imagine different for yourself. I read this really interesting study in the Journal of Psychology about how one of the key indicators of a successful habit change or lifestyle change is having an environmental discontinuity, which is just a fancy word for being like a change in your environment. So when you move to a new place and you take out those things that have been triggering the old habits or the old lifestyle, you are so much more likely to be successful in making that pivot or change that you've been wanting to. And so while moving to a new place and being alone and having to build community from nothing and having to build a career from nothing, while that was all really hard, I was set up to have more success than if I had stayed in my hometown, if I had stayed in the career I thought I wanted, to have these lifestyle changes. And I just think that's a really important perspective to have if you have listeners who do have a big life change coming up. It might not be moving. Maybe it's starting a new career, or maybe it's moving just to a new house in the same town. Any kind of change is a really good opportunity to take advantage of that change in your environment and make whatever it is in your head that you think needs to change in your life.
Okay,
it's a really good opportunity to do it.
Fascinating to me because about a little over a year ago now, I was feeling that so much for my family. I was like, we are all too comfortable. We are all too complacent. We are all just kind of going through the motions. And so we actually were going to move. And it was like, I just knew in my soul that we just needed a shakeup. Like we just needed a new environment. We needed new space. We needed new team effort. We needed new places to put our stuff. Like we'd lived in the same house for 13 years and it just felt so comfortable and so routine. And so I didn't know how to explain it. And I had no idea that there was actually studies about this. Well, it turned out that the house, a whole selling, buying, everything kind of fell through. And then the market has just been insane. And so we were we didn't move. And honestly, that was the hardest part for me, was knowing and feeling like we needed an ultimate shakeup, just like a renewal of energy. That's really what I had written down in my journal. I'm like, I just feel like we need this shakeup, this renewal of energy. We need different bedrooms. We need different, just a whole different thing. And I can see why that is so beneficial, and getting rid of all the stuff that's just been made itself comfortable in all these places in your home, and just seeing new people and new, I don't know. And I was so disappointed that didn't happen. And so now I've been making changes in my home, because I know it is about different places and all the things, but I also am okay, what can I create? What do I have control over? And how can I just change up what I have control over? Because like I said, I had no idea that there's actually studies on this, but I 100% can see how your physical surroundings, your places, all the things can make a big difference. I've also spent a lot of time traveling intentionally, because I'm we need just that change up. We need that shift, that energy change. And so that's really cool that you share that.
Yeah. And I can't remember where I saw this quote now. I wish I could remember, but it said, changes make memories stick, which is what you just said about traveling. When you travel somewhere new, the change of being in a new environment makes those memories stick. And that's why when you look back on your life, you probably remember all the big vacations and all the exciting adventures, because it just lodges in your brain with that change in environment. And so sometimes it's moving, and that's an exciting adventure and also very stressful. But sometimes it's just traveling, like you said, or maybe you change your home office and you work out of the cafe for a while, or whatever it is. I think there's so many different ways to change your environment to give yourself the higher chance of success to have the change in your lifestyle that you want.
Ah, that's really cool. I love that. I totally encourage people listening, if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you're just in the motion of your life, yes, change the scenery, change whatever you can. I always got in trouble for buying not in trouble, but I would buy like new throw pillows for heaven's sake, right? Change the color of your
Right.
paint on your walls, like go work outside, go to a cafe. Like you said, I'm sitting here in a hotel, makeshift office today, podcasting, and
That's right.
I'm sure I'll remember this, right? This is going to be something I remember more than another day at my desk doing the same podcast in the same area and all of that. So just give
Right.
some variety in your life and see it come more alive. I think that's what I was craving is to be more alive rather than to just be living and going through the motions and the same energy and the same things. I just needed to feel a little bit more alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And my changes haven't been by choice because they happen so frequently that I just have to endure them sometimes. So whatever it is, whether you're making your change or if change is happening to you, I think mindset is the big common denominator here, that you can choose how you perceive it. And don't get me wrong, there are days where I'm like, why did I do this? I don't have any childcare help. Like no parents live nearby. And there are days that are super hard with relocation and with being somewhere that's not, your community. It takes time to build that. But I force myself to remind myself of the good, like this, having the opportunity for adventure, having the opportunity to rebuild. Like when we got here, it was a blank canvas. My husband and I were newlyweds. The funny end of the story is that the week my green card came in, I found out I was pregnant. And so then it was like, okay,
you're off the hook.
So another barrier to me beginning my career. Yeah. So, but again, that was more forced time of having to really reflect on what I wanted to do. I got more time to make those decisions. And it wasn't until my daughter turned 1 that I actually finally started in real estate. So it was a good 2.5 years from getting married to starting my career in real estate, of trying to figure out, what I felt called to and what I wanted to do. But whether it's forced or by choice, or you're making it happen, it's going to come down to your mindset. Are you going to choose to see this as a time of sadness and grief and loneliness? Not that it's bad to grieve, but are you going to choose to take the opportunity to really grow, to build the life from scratch that you want to have?
Right, because you're actually going to experience all those emotions, right? And that it's going to feel like there's going to be sadness, there might be loneliness, there might be disappointment, there might be anxiety, but there also is going to be excitement. There's always also going to be fun and new, and this blank canvas that you speak about. And I think the mindset part is, what are you going to choose to focus on? What are you going to lean into?
Right.
What are you going to grasp onto? And what are you going to run with? Because you can choose either of those, right? You can choose to be like, I'm lonely, wake up every day, remind yourself, I'm lonely. Or you could wake up and say, I have a blank canvas. What am I going to do today? What am I going to experience? Where could I go? Who could I meet? Who possibly could live here that I don't even know exists, that could change my entire life, right? And so we just have to choose which side we're going to focus on, grasp onto, and lead with. How did you do that? How have you done that in your multiple moves?
Yeah, it took time to learn that. I definitely had to go through the season of struggle to come out the other side and see that was the choice I could make. And it happened to, another flip side of the coin is, if you're someone who moves a lot, like I'm in ministry, or you're in the military, or you work a corporate job and they move you. The other part is, you can, as lonely as you are and as much as you want to build community, you can also resist that because you're like, I'm moving soon. I have these walls up. I don't want to get too close. So I was doing both. I was like, oh, I'm lonely and I want friends. And then I'd hang out with someone and be like, okay, we'll be kind of friends, but not that much.
I want to like you, but not too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I was in that mindset of okay, we've been here 3 years. Statistically, pastors move every 5 years. I was doing math of when we'd be out of here. And it was just last year that I realized that that's another mindset I had to get out of. I can't just live here half in, half out, because then I'm not having any real memories and any real connections, and not making the most of my time here in this town that we're in right now, however long it might be. That's another mindset issue I had to deal with, to really make sure that I was staying present mentally here in this town and making the most of this time. And I'll have to continue to do that. I have to catch myself in those moments of I'm pushing this person away, or I'm making this decision to not do this thing because I don't think I'm going to be here long enough to see the fruit of it. I have to catch myself. And when I do, I can redirect my thoughts to make sure that I'm making the most of my time. But it's an everyday battle to ask myself what's going on up here and what I'm actually trying to do with my time.
That's actually really interesting. And as you were sharing and talking about that, I was thinking, what are the deepest, most sincere parts of us? And though that is like the connection part, it is that willing to open up and to be seen and to see others and to really truly connect with them. And so how terrible it must feel deep down internally with ourselves when we are not willing to open that part up, because that is the truest, the most like deep and meaningful parts of us. If we're holding that back constantly because of the fear, and I think that people can relate to this in moving. I think that they can relate to this after they've experienced loss. I think that there's a lot of times that we, or rejection, and you're like, I don't want to show anyone this. I don't want to connect on this level because what if it hurts me? But like, I can see how that would actually be holding it close to yourself and not allowing it to be opened up and experienced could be more painful than actually the pain of having to, have a long distance friendship or a relationship. And there's actually a beautiful quote that said something about, like about the flower. It like sometimes the bud, it just stays in a bud until it becomes it's more painful to stay in a bud than it is to like release and to bloom. And I love that visual because you can see they're so tightly bound, and sometimes we want to stay like that because we're afraid. We're afraid of what it might look like or feel like to just open up and release. But then you watch a flower like finally get to that place where they just open up and release, and how beautiful they are. And so I always love a good visual. And that's something that I think that if you are listening and if you feel like you're holding back and you are afraid to open up and to really truly connect and to let other people see you and have these relationships and put yourself out there, it's like, picture yourself as that tight bud, and it might be beautiful. It might still have the colors. It might still have all of the, the leaves and the buds, and it has the petals. It has all of the things of that beautiful flower. But the real beauty comes when it releases and it opens up. And I think that's also true for all of us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that visual too. I hadn't thought about it. And I think we're all wired a little bit differently. I think I'm wired to stay in my bud a bit longer. And I mean, maybe that's a gift of being a chronic mover, as I say. But it's definitely a challenge that I experience, and that I like to challenge myself on not staying wound up too long. But it takes effort. I think everybody struggles in their own areas. And that's one for me, is taking effort to open up to people, for sure.
But the most powerful thing that we can do in our life is be aware of, of like what our challenges are and what our strengths are, and being willing to be open to those and to see them, because you just even being able to acknowledge that, like, oh, that's something that I tend to do, but I also want connection. I also want to be able to have these experiences and these memories and these friendships. That the awareness is everything, because then you can make decisions based on what you actually want, not just what comes natural to you.
Yes, I totally agree. And looking back, that's exactly, what was the pivotal change in all the decisions I made over the last few years. It was suddenly I was aware. And then once you're aware, you can't be unaware anymore.
Right. So even though we wish we could sometimes. Please, I don't want to know all these things. Yeah.
I know. But once I couldn't look back. And did it take years to then figure out what my next steps would be? Yes, it really did. It took years. But I knew after I became aware that I was not called into teaching, and that there was a different lifestyle of entrepreneurship ahead of me, that there was no going back. Like, I couldn't just grin and bear it and pretend to be called to something I wasn't. So I agree with you 100%. Becoming aware is the beginning of growth, I think. And then it takes work after that to continue to take those steps.
Decisions to be made. So when you think about your relocation business of helping support those who are relocating, what are some tips? What is the best case scenario of you being able to help them? Like, what do you actually want for them, or what do you believe for them?
That's such a good question. Yeah. I think a lot of people get really overwhelmed with the logistics, and they're like, okay, I have to do this before I can do this, before I can do this. And it gets really overwhelming, and they put off making any kind of actual movement until it's like, we have to be there in 2 months. Like maybe I need to list
Mm.
my house. And so I think the best thing someone can do if they know relocation's coming up, whether it's, a month from now or it's 6 months from now, is just to start thinking about it, and making a plan of action for your first few steps. Because once you get the first few steps done, the rest fall into place. Like if you start talking to a listing agent to get your home ready to list, she's going to give you every next step for that process. And then she's like, oh, and also you need to talk to this person. Here's a mover. So it's one leads to the next. So worry less about the logistics and more about having one or two major steps to take in the next week. Because if you take it one step at a time, like everything in life, it's going to be a whole lot less overwhelming than if you try and tackle everything all at the beginning. So that's something I offer. I do free one-on-one relocation consultations, and it's going to be less logistics and more, tell me about your goals. Where are you moving from? Where are you moving to? What are you scared of? What do you think will be your biggest hurdles? Have you thought about employment? It's going to be just the big picture items, not where are you going to get moving boxes? Because that stuff can get overwhelming real fast. So that's the best thing you can do, is just have a general loose game plan for your move, and then just start taking one step at a time. And that's what my people who do relocation consultations with me leave with. They leave with a game plan of 2 or 3 big items to begin looking at, to make the rest of their move easier. And another major thing that a lot of people don't think about is who's going to help them when they get there. It's usually like 8 p.m. and they're just like scrolling Zillow, making plans, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the house. And now they have to find a real estate agent without doing any research, which, I mean, it's a bit of an industry secret, which I hate that it's a secret. I think consumers should know that when you click schedule tour on the search apps, you're not like scheduling a tour with the listing agent. You're just giving your information to dozens of real estate agents who are then going to start calling you and asking you, when do you want to see the house? So I think consumers need to be informed, and making sure they're interviewing and vetting buyer's agents, specifically if you are doing a big relocation, someone who specializes in relocation, to be able to help you really get acclimated to your new community, not just while finding a house, but after moving there, getting you plugged into all the resources you need. And that's another service I offer, is personally interviewing and matchmaking agents to people who are moving to new towns.
That's so cool. And you actually are a teacher in your own way now. That's what's even cooler to me, is like sometimes we want to be a teacher, but we just didn't know what kind of teaching was available. We thought that was true for me. I was like, I could be a dance teacher, or I could be a school teacher. And now I'm like, or I could be like a life and business teacher. Like, that's so cool. And here you are, like mentoring and guiding people in these really, really big life-changing, situations. And I think that's like an amazing service that I didn't even know existed. So that's cool. But also how cool that you've been able to take the pieces of teaching and guiding and like creating this structure and plan for people in a way that actually feels so good and that you can relate to.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. I think been thinking about that a lot lately, that I did actually end up back in education.
You absolutely
so much of what I do is educating people about the process of relocation and about the real estate industry and about how to make smart decisions for you and your family. And yeah, I definitely love teaching, and I love that I don't have to like herd children while doing it.
Yeah. Okay. See, and that's what's so cool, is like a lot of times we feel this guilt and shame, but we just don't know what we don't know. You didn't know that maybe that there was this path out there, because I didn't even know it existed until our conversation today. Right. And so it's trusting yourself to take those steps. And it started with you being a realtor, getting you in that industry. And then you saw where the actual need for you was. Maybe you were like, you know what, actually, I'll sell houses. I'll help people buy houses, but that's not where my true passion and purpose is. And it led you to the next step. And that's like a message that I preach so much, is just learn to listen and to trust yourself to take the step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and the next step. And like, you might not even know where the path is leading, but if you can learn to listen and trust yourself, you're always going to be in the best place for you and your life.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I had no idea this is where it was going.
So cool. And no one does. And Steve Jobs says you can only connect the dots backwards. You can never connect dots forward because they haven't happened yet, right? It's not a reality. But if we're allowing ourselves to be guided and directed, and we're listening, and we trust, then we get to have those opportunities to look back and say, wow, I had no idea this is where it was going, but it makes total sense now. And this is exactly where I want to be. So that's really, really
Yes.
cool. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I hope that the listeners got some courage from you, and also
Me
maybe
too.
just some education of like, oh, if I'm relocating, there's options for me to have some guidance, have some
Yep.
support that I might need. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with me and with the listeners.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been an awesome conversation.
I have two questions that I've got to ask at the end of every single podcast episode, because I have
Okay.
this thought of fire in her heart, peace in her soul, and that was like words given to me in my mind of like what women really, really want, especially like in or need, what they need, and maybe not
Mm-hmm.
what they want, what they think they want. But it's this idea that we should always have something that is lighting us on fire, our heart on fire, that we are passionate about, that feels like purpose. It feels like fulfillment. It feels like passion, but then
Mm-hmm.
also not at the expense of that peace that we have within our soul. The peace is
Right.
something that we have to protect, that we have to be aware of, that we have to make a priority, but being able to dance with both of those things. And so the first question is, what is something that is currently lighting your heart on fire?
Well, we just spent a lot of time talking about it. I am just all in right now on helping people relocate everywhere. I love how you asked those two questions together because it's so true. I mean, I am so passionate about helping people relocate, not just the emotional support of like, it's hard, but it's worth it, but also the education. Like you said, I think it's pretty lame the way the real estate industry tricks might be a strong word, but definitely confuses consumers. And they don't always know what they're getting into when they're on the internet looking at
Mm-hmm.
homes. So that's definitely something I'm very passionate about. If you choose to find your real estate agent by clicking around online, that's totally okay, but I hope it's the decision that you're making out of ease and convenience. But recognize that nobody's vetted; they don't have to do anything special to be on there. They're paid advertisements. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something I'm very passionate about right now, is educating people how that works when they're online looking at houses, and that it's essential to make sure you are interviewing and choosing the real estate agent who's a right match for you and is going to serve you and not be in it for any ulterior motives. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. And then protecting my peace is that I love this work so much and I love serving so much. I do struggle to say no. So I've found myself overbooked a lot the last few weeks, and getting really burnt out, which the irony is that's what I wanted to avoid as a teacher. So I have been really flexing my no muscle this past week and probably getting it more trained up than I ever have in my life. And that's so cliche, like just say no, but it's so hard to do when you care about what you're doing and when you care about the people you're serving.
Yeah.
But you really can't do everything. You have to pace yourself. You can't serve everyone. So for the first time in my real estate career as a real estate agent, I have been referring my business here in Aiken out. So this week I passed on 2 people to qualified, awesome agents in town. And in order to serve, my Laura Makes Moves business, which is helping relocators everywhere, I can't be a full-time agent here as well. So that's something I've been practicing, and I'm excited about what's to come.
That's beautiful. And it's really hard as an entrepreneur, especially to
Mm-hmm.
say no to money, to say no to opportunity. And so, but
Yeah,
also when we say yes to more than what we are capable of carrying, then we say no to our peace. We say no to time
so
with our
true.
family. We say no to rest. We say no
Mm-hmm.
to like the things that actually keep us being able to move and to be productive
Yep.
and to be successful. We're saying no to those things for what we want right there in that moment. So thank you for that
Yep.
reminder. Laura, where can the
Yep.
listeners find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Laura Makes Moves. I'm on there daily sharing relocation tips, tricks, and advice. And you can
Amazing.
also check out my website if you're interested in my services. But I'm really most active on Instagram and I love to talk. So please shoot me a DM if you have a move coming up and have any questions about it.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much for being here.
Thank you, Chelsea.